बोलोगे ढंग से बोलो।
Live. We are live now.
हो गया लाइव।
Hi guys. So we are here for another workshop with Suprit Behra on React Native, and he's an intern at Hallparty, very chat person, of course. I'll be passing on the mic to Suprit. Suprit, enjoy.
Cool. So hello everyone. Welcome to I think like one of the last workshops in this series of bootcamps we have been doing at DSC. So today we'll be talking about React Native, and it will be like a very chill, very open discussion. Like language is not a barrier. Like I know 4 languages: English, Hindi, Odia, Bengali. किसी में भी बात करना है कर लो. Uh, so today's objective will be so primarily talk about why React Native, what React Native is, and of course we like in an hour. I will not be able to teach you like how React Native works in its entirety. But what I want to do in this session is to like give you guys a primer of what React Native is, and in case and like give you a brief taste of like how it works, and like just get you guys started. Like you can see if this interests you, and like this could be a good point to like further and like start actually delving deep into app development or React Native. So what is React Native? So React Native is a cross-platform app dev like platform. So what it does is instead of writing, okay, so let's talk about app development in general. So how app development used to happen till now is that you used to have different code bases for different platforms. Right. So let's say like Android and iOS are the 2 major app platforms right now. Uh, so Varun is saying I can land where native users of yes, we'll come to that. Yeah, so the app dev landscape primarily is mostly divided into Android and iOS right now, right? So with Android, you mostly code in Java or Kotlin, which is the language that Android natively understands. So like you code something up, you code an application, Android application in Java or in Kotlin, and that is something that the Android OS natively understands and can run. On the meanwhile, iOS runs on an entirely different architecture. So for iOS, if you want to build like native iOS apps, you use Swift, or earlier you used to use Objective-C. So that's the primary problem with AppDev right now. So let's say you want to build let's say you're a startup, right? You want to build like let's say a very simple shopping app, let's say. So now you have very limited resources and you want to like make an app, obviously. So now for making a good application that is accessible to most users, you need to have 2 separate teams, both for Android and iOS. Now, the problem with this is that one, you have to hire a lot of people. You need to have 2 different teams with 2 very different skill sets who would be working fairly independently. And the second thing is you would have to match features. So let's say, so like you have a product, right? Now it cannot be like it ideally should not be the case that like your iOS app is more powerful than your Android app or has more features, or let's say like the design is entirely different. So you need to have like cross team communication as well, and that takes up a lot of friction. So let's say the iOS people want to implement something, they need to talk to the Android people as well. Okay, like this is how we are going to go about it. This is the design scheme we are using, and this is like the features we want to implement. Then the Android team would have to do a survey that, okay, hey, is this possible or not? Would this be a realistic feature that can be implemented in Android? And usually you'll see that there's a lot of stuff that it's possible on Android, but it's not possible on iOS. So like these are some problems with native app development. But the next question is, why do people, prefer native app development? Native app development basically is, when you use like Java or Kotlin for Android or like Swift for iOS, right? And like back in the days when Windows phones were a thing, I think you used to use C Sharp, if I'm correct. So yeah, like different platforms usually have different languages that it can run natively. Now, the reason like they were so popular is that number one, you can get like native feel using, like these platforms. So for example, like Google has this entire Android development, standard development kit. It has its own design library. So let's say you build a button in like, using the Android SDK, the button will feel very native, like, like just how buttons work across all of Android. iOS has a different design language, how like modals pop up, how, like the stylings work and everything. So there's a different entire style guide for iOS. And to achieve that earlier, you needed to use, like the official SDKs that, Apple provided or Android provided. So which is why, like historically there have been different teams. And of course, native apps like run the fastest. So these are like why people like even till now like mostly have separate teams for Android and iOS. But very recently, in the past let's say about 10 years, this phenomenon of cross-platform app development has arisen. So what is cross-platform app development? So with cross-platform, the idea is you will have one single code base which will work in all platforms. So, for example, like some examples of cross-platform development tools are Flutter and React Native. I think you guys had a Flutter workshop a few days back. So today we'll be talking about React Native, which is like, and these two are like currently the most popular options if you want to go for like cross-platform app development. So like naturally the next question is, like why do cross-platform app development? And the reason is, the problem I highlighted earlier. So, like you're a startup, you have limited resources, and you want to have like one single team which can build apps like across all platforms. So in that case, you would prefer a cross-platform, app development tool. So let's say you go with React Native. What happens with React Native is that you have one single code base, like one team working on the app, all the common stylings, everything. And it works both on Android and iOS out of the box. Now, so earlier also there were like, certain platforms. I think Ionic is one platform which is called a hybrid app development platform, which used to achieve the same thing, which is, you have one code base, and with that one code base, you can have, like your app running everywhere. But the problem with these hybrid tools is that they used to usually run something like a web app. So what Ionic did was it let you run a web app, but it felt like a native app in the sense that, like you could download it from the Play Store, but like in its bare bones, it was ultimately a web app. So, you were very limited in the functionality you could use. And the primary problem was that things did not feel native. Like again, as I was saying, iOS has a different look and feel. Android has a different look and feel of, certain core buttons, how, tabs work, how maybe the back animations work. Now, when you used a hybrid platform like Ionic, the problem was that, this native feel got lost. Like, even though you were on Android or iOS, it didn't feel like an Android app or an iOS app. It felt like, again, like as a web app, which is what it was. So to solve this issue, these cross-platform tools were developed like React Native and Flutter. So what these do is, even though you're having one single code base and you're not coding in the native language of whatever platform you want to build on, uh, what happens is that these basically what they do is you write in one language, and then like the internal workings of whatever platform you're using, be it React Native or Flutter, what they do is they convert it to native code automatically under the hood, and like you don't have to think about it at all. So that's like one of the best parts of cross-platform apps. So even though like let's say you want an Android and iOS app, so with React Native, let's say you're writing an app in JavaScript, which is not a native language either for Android or iOS. But the end result is the final app that you'll get is something that you can think of it as something which transpiles from JavaScript to Java for like Android, and transpiles to Objective C or Swift for iOS. Like that's not how it works, but you can think of it that way. So like it sort of maps JavaScript code to all these native platforms and native libraries. So all these apps are indistinguishable from actual native apps. And that's like one of the best parts of these cross-platform tools that have emerged very recently. So I guess I'll just share my screen. I could not prepare a PPT. I was in IT Gandhinagar for the past 2 weeks, so like didn't really get the time. But I'll just share my screen, and we'll just walk through the entire app dev landscape. Hopefully my screen is visible.
Yes, it's
All right.
visible.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So let's talk about React Native first. So whenever you want to learn about something new, the first thing you want to do is like go to the official docs. Like this is where you want to start. So if you want to learn React Native, we go there. Wait, I'll just minimize this. Yep. So let's get started. So yeah, like if you want to learn React Native, so the first place you should go always are the official docs. So like this has like an introduction, the prerequisites you need to know, some interactive examples. So like throughout this workshop, we'll probably walk through some of these docs. But before that, like I'll continue with the overall idea that we were sharing. So now, like the next question comes is, so okay, we know about React Native and Flutter. How do we choose between the two? I think that's like one of the most common questions, and and one of the topics where like people like fight like anything. So again, as a React Native developer, I have very strong opinions on this. But I'll tell you why you should choose React Native. In my opinion, Flutter is also like an amazing platform. You can build like very, very cool apps. But I personally feel that it brings more value to the table if you like actually go ahead and use React Native. And I'll tell you why. So let's go into the history of React Native, like why React Native was built. So React Native was built, and I'm not making this up. It was built in a internal hackathon organized by Facebook. So Facebook does this really cool thing where they get their employees to participate in hackathons, where like they build really really cool stuff. So meanwhile, normal college students like us, we are building web apps and like just simple integrations with the front end and back end. These guys at Facebook, there's like really experienced engineers in this hackathon, they built React Native, like a very, very preliminary and rudimentary version of React Native. So, why is it called React Native? And if you have done a little bit of app development, you probably must have heard of React. So React is a very popular web development framework. And if you want to get into front-end web development, like 99 times out of 100, this is what you will be using. If you want to build anything decent, at like a large scale. So React was a JavaScript library that was built by Facebook, I think way back in 2009 or something, and then they open sourced it a few years later. So React brought like a very different paradigm to web development, and if you're aware about the general history of web development, so earlier people used to write apps in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and in the backend you had something like Django templating or PHP or like something like those. The problem with that was that like you could not build very interactive websites. You could not do very complex operations on the client side. Almost everything had to be done server side, which really restricted the power websites could have, and also the ease of development of these tools. So React like was a solution to solve all these issues. Angular is another popular framework that like tried to solve the same issue, and that was built by Google. So React was built by Facebook, and it was open sourced a few years later, I think around 2012 or 13. And then in 2015, what the Facebook developers did was they ported React, like all the concepts around which React is built, and then they ported it to something they called React Native. So the basic idea was, if you know how to build websites in React, you can get up to speed and build applications like native mobile applications using React Native in no time. And like that is not an exaggeration. If you have done React, like it takes 2 weeks to, like become an app developer. I myself did that. I technically joined Hallparty as a web developer, but they like the app person left. So they were like, hey, like why don't you shift to the app team? I was like, sure, like I'll get to learn something new. And I mean, it took me like 2 weeks to, like become a full-fledged app developer. And that's what I've been doing for the last 6 months. Uh, so there are a lot of similarities between React and React Native. Now, of course, if you are getting started, like if let's say you do not have any experience with React, of course, like you can get started with React Native as well. React is not a prerequisite to React Native, but the concepts around which both React and React Native are built, they are sort of required to, understand React. Uh, so now in comparison with Flutter, so number one, Flutter is built in this language called Dart. Flutter was built by Google. It is fairly new. I think it was launched in, let's see when it was launched. Flutter launch date. This was launched in 2017 and React Native was launched in 2015. So Flutter is built in this language called Dart. And I'll show you how Dart looks. So Dart is very similar to, so if you see this code sample, So you can probably see like a lot of classes and stuff. So Dart is very similar to C++, like how C++ works. And it is like a language custom built by Google. And mostly it is used only in the context of Flutter. On the other hand, React Native, it is built, so you code React Native in JavaScript or TypeScript. I'll come to what TypeScript is later. But the advantage with the fact that it is built in JavaScript is that JavaScript is used everywhere. Like, and by everywhere, I mean everywhere. With JavaScript, you can build websites using like things like React, Vue, or any of your popular frameworks. You can do front-end development with JavaScript. You can do back-end development. You can do like back-end development in Node, Express, Deno. Like there are like a bunch of platforms. Uh, with JavaScript, you can also do AI and machine learning, like everyone's favorite topic nowadays. So very popular libraries like TensorFlow. TensorFlow is ported in JS, so you can like proper do machine learning in JavaScript. And very surprisingly, something even I did not know, but I found from my roommate that you can apparently use JavaScript in embedded systems nowadays as well. So you have libraries where you can like use JavaScript to build things for very low level things. So JavaScript is everywhere. The entire web is built on JavaScript. A lot of servers are built in JavaScript. So like you'll find it everywhere. So, in my opinion, especially when you're starting out, it's helpful if you are proficient in one language, which you can apply to a lot of domains. Now, of course, like the idea is to learn the basics of a language and like how any language works. So, like it shouldn't take you much time to learn a new language. But regardless, like if you master JavaScript through React Native or through any of the applications where JavaScript is used, you can like apply those same learnings everywhere, be it in React, be it in React Native, be it in Node.js for backend, be it in TensorFlow.js for like machine learning, or even embedded system design. And I won't be surprised if you can do even things like game development in JavaScript as well. So it is a very mature language today. It is constantly evolving. There's like good library support. So all the Python folks, you probably must know about pip, right? That's like the like you'll find like a lot of Python libraries there. So similarly, we have something called npm, and npm is basically sort of the pip equivalent for JavaScript. And you can find like lots of libraries to do anything in npm, like libraries for React, libraries for React Native, libraries for front end, back end, like anything you can like possibly think about. So it's a very mature ecosystem, and just by learning React Native, you can like switch to web development very soon as well. So like as a React Native developer today, like I can apply both to React and React Native positions, which is both websites and apps. So I think that's like a very good position to be in. So yeah, like these are some like pedagogical advantages of why you should probably learn React Native instead of Flutter. And even apart from that, when we talk about like let's say like you are like a like you're like a proper software engineer, right? You do not have any constraints about learning and stuff. And even then, like I'd say React Native like sort of makes more sense, is because like like again, it is my personal opinion. From what I have seen, the React Native ecosystem is like significantly more mature than Flutter. Like if you see the React Native GitHub repo, it is like extremely active. It has like over 100,000 stars. Like there's constantly issues, pull requests. It's a very mature ecosystem. Like a lot of people have been working in it, and I personally, like in my personal experience, I feel it is more mature than Flutter. So this is why, like why I personally feel you should use React Native. Earlier, Flutter used to be like slightly faster than React Native, but now there have been like a lot of improvements and like a lot of under the fundamental under the hood changes that make React Native like pretty fast. So like that's my take on the like historic Flutter versus React Native battle. I think it is a great time to get started with React Native, especially if you want to get into app development, and especially if you like down the line want to do both app and front-end web development. I think if that is something that you want, then React Native is like a no-brainer choice. Like you learn React Native, you can do web development. If you already know web development in React, like in little to no time, you can transition to React. Like literally all the concepts carry over. So like that's a brief primer on why React Native. So let's maybe dive into some basic React Native code. Okay, so before that, I think I'll tell you guys how to get started. So okay, let's say you have decided, you want to learn React Native. So what next? How do you set up the environment? What are the considerations? So so one thing you should know, especially if you're coming from a web development background, is that environment setup in app development is a pain. So you need to get used to that. It is much more simpler in web development. So in app development, you have to do a lot of environment setup, but this is mostly a one-time job. And the more you do app development, the more used to you get to it. So that's the thing. And okay, a lot of you might wonder what are the system requirements if you want to do app development. So you'll probably and if you want to run your apps on Android, you need to have Android Studio. And if you want to do if you want to run your apps on an iOS device, then you need to have an Apple device and you need to use Xcode for it. So the problem is that these things take up a lot of memory. So ideally, you should have a minimum of 8 gigs of RAM and a decentish processor i5 should work, Ryzen 5 should work, the newer generations of Ryzen 3 should work as well. But in case you don't have these, even that's not an issue. I mean, you can run all these things. It's just that they'll be probably way too slow. And one thing you can do to, if you have less RAM, one thing you can do is to, instead of running apps on your emulator, you can run them natively on your you can run them on your app, instead of on your phone, sorry, instead of the emulator. So that's something you can do. So, okay, so how do you get started with React Native? So again, whenever you want to look at, how to set up your environment and stuff, the first place you should look at is the documentation. So let's go to React Native environment setup. Yep, so this is the environment setup. So I'll try to, broadly classify this as best as I can. So there are two use cases. So again, all React Native apps you build, you can they will work both on iOS and Android. That's not an issue. But you want to be able to run those apps on your local machine, on your local device, right? So there are two options. So one is if you have an Apple device, you can run apps both on Android and iOS. So if you want to go for Android, you need to get Android Studio, and all the instructions are here. So you just basically step by step follow these. And so let's say you have a MacBook, right? And you want to develop for iOS. So these are all the steps you need to do. They're fairly straightforward. They take a fair bit of time, especially getting the iOS simulator working. I think it took me almost an entire night for it to get installed. So you need to be very patient. But you just, once you just straightforward follow these steps, you should have an environment running. And so I'll just show you. This is how Xcode looks. Yep, so this is how Xcode looks, and if so this is loading right now. So if I build the Hallparty app, the simulator should pop up where I can play around with the app and everything. And this is how Xcode looks. So I don't use Xcode as my primary code editor, and you don't need to use Xcode or Android Studio. So I instead just like everyone else, I use Visual Studio Code. So so the basic idea is to run the application on an emulator or on your device, you need to have either Android Studio if you want to go with Android, or you need to have Xcode if you want to go with iOS. And for running iOS apps natively, you need to have an Apple device. And for coding, you can just use Visual Studio Code, just like you probably have been using for everything else. You don't need to use Android Studio. I think if you go with native development, let's say no, building Android apps in Java or Kotlin, you probably, I think most of you it is a good option to code in Android Studio, but that's not the case with React Native. So what you do is you just basically follow the steps one by one, very straightforward. You be patient. There's like you need to have good internet. I think like there's almost 15 GB of stuff you need to download, but it's a one-time thing. And once you do that, you're pretty much all set, unless you want to add in a new device or a new Android or iOS version. Okay, what's in the chat? If doesn't yes, Swift doesn't give you an option, so you have to use Xcode. And yeah, you need to use Android Studio as well. Yup, for this. So this is like a good thing with React Native and even with Flutter, I believe. So like you can just use any code editor you're comfortable with. It doesn't have to be VS Code. For all the Linux people there, you can use Vim as well, like New Vim or something. Anything works. You just need Android Studio or Xcode to be able to run those apps, like either on an emulator or like on your local device. So that's like the entire deal with setup. Now, this is something special with React Native. Like, let's say everything seems very daunting. Like, you're like, I don't want to spend like an entire night or like one day to set all this bullshit up, right? I just want to get my hands dirty. I want to try this thing out. So, how do you go about it? So, React Native has this very special thing. It's called Expo. Let's just go to this site. I think I'm logged into my account. Expo docs. Yep. Okay, now what is Expo? So Expo is this thing which is built on top of React Native. So this Expo is not React Native, but it is something which is built on top of React Native, and it's sort you can think of it as a wrapper around React Native. So what it does is Expo makes it like really, really easy to run like applications. So you don't need to do any of the setup. You don't need to have Android Studio. You don't need to have Xcode. You can simply like build apps on your browser and even simulate them on your browser itself. Like, I don't know if I have some examples here. Create an account. I'll just see if I have some snacks. I do not have any snacks. So let's maybe look at some examples. Let's just see this in action. Wait, I'll just turn off dark mode. Hmm. Oh, it's not working for some reason. Never mind, technical issues happen. But the basic idea is, so with Expo, what you can do is you can like code right here. Okay, like there we have it. So this is like an application. Like we can change things here. So let's say, we change this to workshop, and this should work. Yeah. So you have like an entire environment right here. So you can code on their online editor, and you can have it run like right there in a web browser. So this is not a website. This is like a simulation of how it would look in the app, but on the browser. Now, let's say you want to run this like on your Android device. Like, of course, you're an app developer, right? So you should probably have a look at how your apps would look actually like run or like in an actual device, right? So all you do is you go to Android, run on a device. You need to make an account, and once you make an account, you'll get a QR code. So then all you need to do is get the Expo Go app. It is available for iOS as well as Android. You can find it on the App Store and Play Store. All you do is you go to Expo and you scan this QR code, and boom, it runs on your device. Like, there's no setup involved. You don't need to connect any wires. You don't even need to have a USB cable. You just scan the code, it runs on a device. You make any changes, you can see those changes live on a device. So this is like a very, very cool tool to, like very quickly test out app. And let's say you do not have an Apple device, but you want to test your application in an iOS device as well, right? So let's say you have a Android phone, right? Android, not an Android phone. Let's say you have like a Linux laptop or a Windows laptop, right? Now you want to test your application on an iPhone. So you can do this with Expo. So you can just like grab your iPhone and you can scan the QR code, and you'll have the app running in your iPhone. So like it sounds too good to be true, and of course there's a catch. So the catch is that Expo is not React Native. Like it's technically not exactly like React Native. So as I said, it's a wrapper, it's a framework of sorts around React Native. So what it does is that it encapsulates a few things and it gives you like a lot of additional functionality. So the core idea of Expo is that, let's say you need to like build an app very quickly. Let's say like you're in a hackathon, or let's say you're doing like a small project where there's like a lot of time constraints and you probably would not be, like building up on the app a lot. So what you can do is Expo has a lot of pre-built components. So I'll give you like a real life example. So recently I participated in this hackathon, and there I needed to build like a QR code scanner, right? Like as a part of the application. So all I did, so Expo has a QR code scanner built in. I just go to Expo QR code scanner. This is our barcode scanner. And as you can see, this is like just a component here. Yeah, import barcode scanner from Expo barcode scanner. So like Expo has a lot of these pre-built components, so you don't have to, worry about coding this up from scratch, or worrying about libraries. So barcode scanner is a very simple example. You can find Expo components for a lot of different things. And the other advantage that Expo has is that you don't have to touch like native code. For a lot of things currently in React Native, it is not entirely implementable in JavaScript. So let's say around realistically around 95 to 96, 7% of your code base would be like entirely in like shared code base in React Native in JavaScript. But some parts of your application, some features, you would have to like touch the native modules both for iOS and Android individually to make them work. So you need to like do a bit of Java coding or a bit of Swift coding to make certain modules work. You don't need to like be an expert in them. You just need to know how this library works, but you need to like get your hands dirty to get certain things working, like, like some notification features, push notifications, um, or certain things regarding updates and stuff. So this is something you don't have to do with Expo. So this is both a feature and a bug in a sense. The feature part is that, of course, you don't have to touch native code, but the problem is that Expo does not currently cover all like functionalities. So there might be cases where you want to implement native features, but of course you can't because Expo doesn't allow you to like do that. You can only code in the Expo JavaScript code base throughout. So like the bottom line is, if you just want to like quickly build an application, quickly prototype it, and like you are sure that you don't want to scale it, you don't want to do an environment setup, or you just want to quickly test out something, Expo is like amazing. Like it gives you like, so like you can access the accelerometer, you can like all these things are in your control. Expo also has a lot of styling features, so maybe if you can go here, which are not present in React Native. Uh, so yeah, for example, this card, I believe, like this is also an Expo thing. So yeah, this is like how Expo works. So this is like a great tool to get started. And I would recommend if you're getting started and if you feel intimidated by all the setup, go with Expo. Like Expo is an amazing tool to learn. But down the line, let's say, after a month, after you're like fairly comfortable, you would want to shift to React Native. Why? Because React Native is what is used in pretty much any production application, and React Native is not restrictive at all. So with Expo, the problem is you are only restricted to whatever features the Expo developers have built. So anything outside of that, so let's say something is available in React Native but has not been ported to Expo yet, you would not be able to use it. And the most important drawback is that you cannot touch like native code. So let's say there is a library for Android which does not have a React Native equivalent. So you would want to have the power to, like actually go and code it up in like Java or something, which you can do with React Native. You can have like separate code for Android, separate code for iOS, and a common code base. So yeah, so which is why Expo is not used in the industry, but it is like a great tool to get started. And with Expo has like good documentation as well. So let's like Expo environment setup. Uh, so with so it's present in the React Native docs as well. So if you want to go with Expo, you can like follow these instructions. So you just click here, then you just follow all these. And as you can see, there's no Android Studio, there's no Xcode, there is no setup. You just need to install Expo CLI, which is an NPM tool. You install Expo CLI, you start the project, and then you just go to VS Code and code your app up. And now, how do you like run it on an application? Like again, with Expo CLI, you get this QR code thing on your terminal. You scan it with the Expo Go app, and there you go. Like you can test your app, you can like hot reload your app. Also, hot reloading works. What is hot reloading? Hot reloading is basically, any change you make in the app, it automatically reflects. Like any change you make in the code, for example, here we changed this thing, right? We changed the default text to React Native Workshop. Uh, yeah, right here. So as I saved this, like this immediately changed. So this is called hot reload. You'll find this in Flutter as well. You will find this in React Native as well. And it's present in Expo too. And it's very convenient, as you can imagine. So you just run Expo CLI on your terminal, open up VS Code, code up whatever you want, then open up Expo Go app on your phone, scan the QR code that appears in the terminal, and there you go. You like can run your app, test your app locally. So this is a very convenient tool to get started. If you go to YouTube and search for like React Native tutorials, most likely you'll find something in Expo. So I think this is a tutorial I watched a long time back. So as you can see, like this uses Expo as well. I think then this will be like wait, I'll just note this. Yeah, so you just run Expo CLI, it automatically installs everything that is required. Then you install this Expo client app. Then you just open VS Code, set up your VS Code. And okay, I'll show you some VS Code tools which are like pretty cool. Some extensions you should have. So if you search for React Native, you'll like find a bunch of extensions. This is like one I use a lot. And even if you're a React developer, you should like totally have this. What this extension does is that it gives you snippets. So let's say I have a new file. Then I need to save this as a JavaScript file. Let's say test route. So if I do RAFC, I automatically get all this boilerplate code. So this is pretty cool. You should totally use this. It works with Redux as well. And we'll talk about Redux too. So yeah, this is like the overall React Native landscape. This is how you get started. Again, like in a very brief summary, if you want to like go the React Native way, you have to either set up Android Studio or Xcode. The instructions are right here, like in the documentation. But if you do not want to go through all that hassle, or if you have a machine which is not very capable, or let's say which does not have a lot of RAM, go with Expo. Like Expo is an amazing tool to get started. You will basically be writing mostly React Native code with some Expo add-ons. So, like let's say you later want to shift to React Native, like it's basically the same thing. So you won't have a lot of issues shifting. But in case you start with Expo and you want to like further advance in your understanding of app development, you should totally shift to like proper React Native, like without Expo. So this is cool for building like stuff in hackathons and very, very small projects. But if you would be working, let's say in a startup or a real company, they would be using like normal React Native. So that's like how the entire landscape is. Uh, okay, so it's I think around 45 minutes. I'll just see if there are any questions. Then chat, let's go. Good, let's go snacks yummy. Yeah, you can make iPhone apps on Linux with React. Yeah, that is basically the value proposition if you use React Native and you use Expo. So yeah, that's like a very cool thing. Like a lot of people are unable to test out apps on iPhone unless they have a MacBook, which is like a huge problem. But if you like build stuff on Expo, that's like not an issue at all. You just scan the QR code and it runs like on any device, be it Android or iOS. So that's something like really, really cool. So before we wrap up, I guess like I'll just show you an example code. So let's try building the Hallparty app. Hopefully I'll not get sued because this is not open source, but let's go. Also, if you guys have like any questions at all, like feel free to post them on the chats or even unmute yourselves. Then I'm voting. Yes, let's go. Yeah, so Metro is a bundler which runs every time like you run a React Native application, and you just gotta give it some time. The iOS simulator should pop up. Yup, there you go, iPhone 13. And again, like if you have an actual device, so like right now I don't have an iPhone, so I use the simulator. But if let's say you are like using Android Studio, it's always a better option to like actually use your own device, like just connect it with a USB. There are some instructions, there are some steps you need to do, and then you can like build your apps on your local phone instead of like in the simulator. So that frees up a lot of RAM. You can actually like scroll, touch, and like get a feel of how the app would actually feel on a real phone. So that's something you should do. But and simulators are useful for testing on devices you currently don't have. So let's say I have a 5-inch small Android phone, right? But most people right now have like huge Android phones with like 6.5 plus inch screens, right? So if I want to test on screens of that size, I would use a simulator. Or let's say my Android phone is pretty old. It's running on, let's say, Android 10 or 11, which is fairly old. Uh, and you want to test it on your like on the latest Android version. So that's when you would want to use a simulator. And again, like as you can see, the simulators are pretty slow, so that's like a major downside. And Hallparty is like it's a pretty big code base, so it takes time to compile, but it's all right. In the meanwhile, like I'll walk you through. So I'll just give you a feel of how React Native code looks like. So again, like if you come from a web development background, this is home, right? Like this is plain React, like you're doing all React stuff. It uses so you're using use state, all these React hooks you are like very familiar about. And for styling, you literally use CSS. Like it's unironically CSS. There is there's nothing new about it. It's the same CSS that you are familiar with in web development. Uh, so hopefully, the by the time the app builds, uh, okay, it's bundling. Okay, I'll try to like sort of walk you through the code. Okay, so one thing you'll probably notice is that this app is not in this file is not in JavaScript. It's actually in TypeScript. And I don't have time to go through TypeScript right now, but I'll give you a brief primer. So if you have used JavaScript before, the primary problem with JavaScript is that there are no types. So let's say you want to declare a variable. It's not leaking the source. Oops, don't sue me, guys. Yeah, so in JavaScript, there is a variable, right? Let count equal to count, right? So like you set count as 5, but theoretically in JavaScript, count can have like a lot of issues, especially once you like play around with JavaScript applications, you get a lot of errors, especially revolving around undefined. And like there are like multiple things. So to solve all these issues, like TypeScript is something that was developed, and TypeScript basically gives you data types. So if you've done, let's say, C or C++, you need to do int count equals to 5. So it's a similar idea in TypeScript. You need to set the data types of each variables, and that solves like a lot of issues. And TypeScript is the best. Exactly, exactly. TypeScript supremacy, guys. And I'd say if you are getting started, use JavaScript. All right, don't use TypeScript. First, learn JavaScript, build a few applications, build a few websites with JavaScript. See the pitfalls. Like, like one error like I constantly used to get was, those undefined errors, right? So let's say you're fetching data from an API and that value and you're storing the data in a variable, right? And that variable currently does not have any value and you're passing it as a prop somewhere. So you get like a lot of undefined errors. With TypeScript, everything is solved. Like you don't need to do gymnastics. You don't need to check if the variable has some value before sending it as a prop somewhere. So, like you don't need to do any type checking. Like it all automatically does it for you. And there is very intelligent autocomplete because now everything has types. So let's say you have an object, if you just do dot and wait, let's see if there's an object where I can. Okay, so if we do reporting mutation dot very good options. Yeah. So this reporting mutation is like an internal. Wait, I'll just show you what this is. Yeah, so this is like basically a function which returns like these things. So now with JavaScript, I would have no knowledge about, like I would have to like open this file and see, what functions are being returned. But with TypeScript, like if I just do dot, it gives me autocomplete. You cannot get this in JavaScript because in JavaScript, these things are not fixed in a way. So like the editor has no way to know, like what to complete, and you can like add anything in here and it won't give you any errors. So TypeScript solves all these issues, like when you can resolve all these issues while in compilation, while in JavaScript you would have to resolve these in runtime. So these are some of the benefits. But if you are just starting, start with JavaScript, learn all the pitfalls, see for yourself where all the pitfalls of JavaScript are, then learn TypeScript, and you will have like zero issues. So that's a brief primer. Hallparty code base is in TypeScript, and if you would be working with any decently good company or a decently large code base or with any open source project, be it for front-end development or for React Native app development, the code base would be in TypeScript. So once you are, past that beginner phase, and if you want to move into like an intermediate, you want to become an intermediate or advanced developer, I highly recommend you like switch to TypeScript, like be very comfortable with it. So yeah, that's some advice. And okay, so I'll just like try to so this is a report screen. Wait, I'll just show if it be possible for me to show it on the app. Okay, so this app has built, uh, hopefully the report button is there. Yeah, there's the report button. Yeah, this is the screen. So this code you see right here, this is for the report screen. So as you can see, it's a fairly simple screen. Like you have this text right here, you have a bunch of options, then you have a report button, clicking which basically like all this data, like let's say I select hate speech, right? And I click report. So then like it would communicate with the backend API and tell that this particular person has reported this post for this particular reason. So how do you code it? So again, this is all like simple JavaScript. You have like a bunch of report options. Then again, like if you have not used React before, this will be very confusing, and that's all right. But in case you have used React, I just wanted to give you a feel of how this is like exactly like React. So you have your template in a select, and this is what you're in. Like again, this is exactly like React. So Vue is basically like a div. So yeah, like in there are some few changes like when you port from like React and web development to app development. One of which is like for example, div becomes Vue. So Vue is like the div equivalent for React Native. And Flatlist is also, okay, I'll talk about Flatlist as well. Flatlist is something like extremely cool. Especially if you're coming from web development, you will be able to appreciate it. Okay. Also, if you go to React Native docs, this thing that you see, these are also Expo snacks. So they make it possible for you to just tinker around code here and like see the output right here. So that's Expo again. So what Flatlist does is Flatlist is a way to like render a list of components. So like here you have first item, second item, third item, right? These could be like any React components that you want to render. Now, let's say you're coming from a web development React background, right? So in React, like the problem is, let's say you have 500 items, right? Let's say you're fetching data from a server. Let's say it's a basic to-do application. So you're fetching, what to-dos the person has made in the past. Let's say let's say they made 100 to do, so you get like 100 items in response. Now, obviously, you can't render all of them at once. It would like take up a lot of memory, and it would make like the website slow, right? So then you have to like, fetch only certain items from the server, then display only certain items. And so basically like implementing infinite scrolling is an issue. What is infinite scrolling? Infinite scrolling is, like let's say you go to Instagram, there's like if you scroll down, like you can keep scrolling down. Like there's no end to how much you can scroll, right? Whenever you scroll down, like once you reach a certain level, it fetches more data from the server and like shows it to you right in the app. So that is infinite scrolling. So for like you need to do some pretty hacky things to get good infinite scrolling on a website. But in app development, React Native like does it for you. It is extremely simple. So this is a flat list. Yup, there you go. This is a flat list. You need to pass it parameter called data, which basically just has an ID and whatever things you want to render. And you pass a render item function. And what the render item function does is basically for each of these items in this array, it executes this React component. So, like for example, here for every item, we execute this React component. And there's a key extractor. Key extractor is basically a way of getting the ID. So right here, like you can find the ID right from like this data variable. So this is how it works, and boom, you have like a proper, very performant, very optimized, like scrollable list, which has infinite scroll. So this is like something really cool. And there's like a lot of small things which are good in React Native. Like I personally like prefer doing React Native compared to like web development now. So like you have more challenging problems, and like certain things simply make very easy. And also, if you're someone who doesn't like to do CSS at all and you hate CSS with the core of your heart, but you need to like stay in the front end landscape, you can try out React Native. Because in React Native, like you literally need to just know Flexbox. You do not need to know any fancy libraries like Bootstrap, Material UI, Chakra, like anything like that. You don't need to bother much about responsivity. Okay, I think that's an area where most people like face struggles. Wait, I'll just check the chat. Yeah, Varanium hates CSS, and Raga says, yeah, LinkedIn has invested heavily on TypeScript. TypeScript is actually developed by Microsoft, so like there's proper like industry backing, and pretty much every like major open source project, major like major production level applications websites, all of them are in TypeScript. And yeah, so like if you do not enjoy CSS much, you hate making websites responsive, you will love app development because mostly mobile screen sizes do not vary much. Okay, it's a different story if you want to develop port the same app for a tablet as well. But in general, like you don't have to care much about responsibility. I'll just show you like some CSS here. So if you have done like CSS for web development, you will know that like you'll get scolded if you use like 20px or some absolute unit, right? You are encouraged to use rem or have a lot of media queries and stuff. But here, like this is straight from the Hallparty code base. Like it's all absolute stuff, and you can like do media query equivalents in React Native as well, of course. But you usually don't need them, and this is all simple. The CSS is all just simple Flexbox. And also, like if you want to refresh Flexbox, you just go to It's like one of the cutest little websites Xbox. So yeah, app dev is pretty beautiful. I'll show you. So I think any external UI library, this is in Flexbox. And it's doable. It's not complicated. And I think that's something pretty cool as well. If you do not like enjoy making React Native is a good option to explore. Uh, why there's absolutely. Okay, so how do I put it? So again, like the thing with app development is that phone screen sizes are mostly like in the similar range. Like in websites, you need to worry about making this responsive. So this would mean, like this website should scale, like in all these like weird resolutions and dimensions. But in applications, it's mostly like similar. So which is why in React Native, like you pretty much almost always use absolute units. Now, of course, you can do like something like media queries as well. And in fact, like a lot of part of the code base, we have like something similar to media queries. But it's not extremely like not convoluted. And there's only very few things for which you need to like make things responsive in a way. If you're doing app development. So yeah, that's something like cool. And yep. So what's more? Yeah. So you basically have a div right here, and you can like do stylings for the div right here. So you have a white background color. You set it. You give it a height. You give it a width. Then you have a flat list, and in the flat list, I render the report option. So like all these options right here. Wait, I'll just open the simulator. Let's go to the report screen. Yeah, so again, like I'm using a flat list to render all these items. Uh, and then it's like mostly like plain CSS and styling. So and you can also give a header component to the flat list. So the header component is basically this report screen, this back button thing, and the render item is basically like the code for each of these items. Each rep on touching it, this thing happens. So this is code for making that work. And whenever you click on the button, you set this as the like selected option using use state. And whenever you click on any of these things, so this thing changes to like this black thing. So this is what is implemented. So if this is the selected option, then basically like have these stylings. So this is how it works. So again, like this is probably very, again, it's the other way around. You learn this, you will be able to understand like code bases in more time. And yeah, it's just simple stylings there. And this is like the part where you call the API. And this is like the user reporting thing is like some internal helper functions that help us call the API. For Hallparty, we use GraphQL, which is an alternative to REST API, which probably you guys have worked on till now. And this is also something like I'd like to suggest. If okay, like firstly, if you have like primarily worked on, I say like just demo projects, then it is a good idea to integrate it. So let's say you're a front-end developer or an app developer, right? Like you just got started, you like saw some tutorial and you like built a dummy, let's say a to-do list, right? So the next thing you should do is try connecting it to a REST API. A REST API is basically something using which you can communicate with the backend. So that way you can like, integrate your application or your website with the backend as well. So that's like the first thing you should get yourself familiar with. And after that, like once you're like very familiar with REST APIs, like REST APIs are very commonly used across the industry. If you want to work on some like cutting edge technology, to check out GraphQL. So GraphQL is like, in my opinion, like the next big thing. And for a lot of applications, GraphQL makes like a lot more sense than REST APIs. So yeah, like the GraphQL is something you should play around with, in the sense that look into how you can integrate React or React Native applications with GraphQL. So this is, something you should do like down the line once you are like very familiar with this entire environment. So yeah, like this is a very short overview of React Native. I probably threw in a bunch of terms, but the overall idea was that to expose you to all this terminology. So when you like actually go into learning React Native, you do not face like a lot of issues. A lot of these things do not seem new to you. So that was like my objective with the session. So do you guys have any questions? Feel free to put them in the chat. Feel free to unmute yourselves. Like, let's make this interactive. Like any questions, like it doesn't matter. Like you can ask me like generic. Mm. is front end web dev. It's not about like importance, like or can we say it? Oh yeah, okay. So if you go to React Native docs, they'll tell you that you need to know React. But the thing is, you don't need to know, again, like as I said in the start, you don't need to know React per se. You need to know like the concepts around which React are built, which is the same for React and React Native. So again, I personally started with React and then transitioned into React Native. But there are a lot of people who straight away started with React Native, and React Native was their first exposure to anything similar to React or even JavaScript per se. So you can totally get started. It's just that like all the concepts in React and React Native are like the core concepts are like extremely similar. So you can like get started either way. If you maybe want to try out web development first, you can like go with React. The thing with React is that I believe there are more resources to get started with React compared to React Native, but that does not mean like there are no resources. There's like a lot of resources that teach you React Native from scratch. So again, like if you are wondering how to get started, the best place is like just go to YouTube, search for React Native tutorials, and you'll find like a bunch of them. This is like a good place to get started. You can also look at Udemy. Udemy courses, like just make sure the Udemy course is recent. Otherwise, like they're mostly fairly good quality. So you can search for, yeah. I personally have not done any of these Udemy or YouTube tutorials. Like I did them when I was learning React, but not React Native. I mostly did them when I already knew React, so that's thing. So I believe like this one does it from scratch. This one also does it from scratch. So yeah, most of these courses you'll find here, they do it from scratch. This is a zero to mastery course. It's not a prerequisite at all to know web development or React Native. It's just that it is just that you can like correlate a lot of concepts if you like know both. If you like, let's say you know React and you're learning React Native, or let's say you have learned React Native and you're learning Redux, which is something you will most likely use if you are working in any decently large size project. So again, these are all intermediate concepts you should first get familiar with or through these Udemy courses. And with Udemy courses, don't just watch them, like code along with them. And once you have like done one Udemy course, do not do any more Udemy courses. Then try to do projects on your own. Like just think of anything, like it doesn't have to be like new. You don't have to build it on your own. That is like extremely important. And whenever you're stuck, Google around and see the documentation. Think the documentation is like very important. So that way you are not just stuck in tutorial hell. What is tutorial hell? Tutorial hell is basically, like you're only following tutorials, and without a tutorial you cannot build anything. So you do not want to be in that position, right? So once you like know the basics of any new thing, try building something very, very basic on your own. Like just think of a few basics. Let's say you want to move to an intermediate level. You should probably check out Redux as well. You should probably check out Redux as well. Now, what is Redux? Redux is basically a state management tool. So, what is state management? In your React or React Native application, there will be a lot of you can think of it as not a database, but like a data store. There'll be like a lot of data that you want to keep persistent across revendors. Like basically, let's say you have a website, you press refresh, all the data is reset, right? Let's say you have a variable called count, like in the JavaScript file. You initialize it as 5. Now you refresh the page, the like count becomes 0, right? So you need like a store, which is so where values remain the same, even like no matter you like close the app, you refresh the app, you refresh the website. So this is something called global state, and this becomes like very important when you are building like slightly larger scale apps and websites. And this is something you'll find in pretty much all projects. So it's very useful to get familiar with this as well. Now, what most people won't tell you is that you can use something called React Toolkit, which makes Redux like a million times simpler. So if you want to get started with Redux, start by learn Redux Toolkit, right? Learn Redux Toolkit, but basically is a wrapper of sorts, and it makes code a lot simpler. It makes using Redux like very, very easy. In fact, Redux Toolkit is what we use in Hallparty as well. But like it is important to learn Redux like without the toolkit part as well, just to better your understanding. But you will not need to use like the OG Redux for coding. I think that this is fairly recent. Like when I started my development journey, like Redux Toolkit was not very popular. I had to learn Redux, and it's a pain. Like there's a lot of boilerplate and stuff. Redux Toolkit solves most of these issues, so just go with Redux Toolkit. So yeah, this is like another thing. And so yeah, like with a few tutorials, like just go to YouTube, search for like, these 2-hour tutorials. I think there was this ELC activity I had to do for mobile app development. I think I remember. So these are a good place to get started, get a feel of, like what React Native development is. Then if you find it interesting, go to Udemy, like do one of these courses. If you already have knowledge in React, then you can skip this course part. You can straight away go to the documentation, and you will understand one of these Udemy courses. And once you have done this Udemy courses, just go to React documentation, React Native documentation, build things out for yourself, get out of Expo, like set up React Native, set up Android Studio, set up Xcode on your development, not Expo development. And once you have done that, explore more advanced concepts like Redux. Check out GraphQL, how to work with GraphQL, and try to contribute to either open source projects or like find a nice startup or a nice company that is working on like cutting edge code. So that is like sort of the roadmap that everyone nowadays wants. If you want to get started with React Native. Wait, do we have any more questions? Resume. Okay. Hallparty. Okay. So Hallparty is essentially a startup. It is a startup which was founded by some Bits Milani alumni. So what we do at Hallparty is the idea is to create like a close-knit social media app, but only for people of one particular college, which is, if you remember, how Facebook started. So in Hallparty, like if you download and install Hallparty right now, you need to sign up with your Thapar ID, and you will basically get like a pretty good social media kind of experience. It has features of Instagram, it has some features of Discord, so it's like the best parts of most social media applications. And it's like a college-based close-knit community, so you'll only find people from Thapar in there. So it's not very active right now, but there was about a year back, like it was fairly active in Thapar. Like we had a lot of meme pages, only like Thapar-centric meme pages. Like there were a lot of posts happening. So it's like a nice college-centric like focused community. And we are also about to delve into fintech of ways. So that's something like in the pipeline. And React Native is used to build the Hallparty app. The Hallparty app is built entirely in React Native. Like if you see the code base writer, all of this is React Native. We use TypeScript. We use GraphQL as like the API of sorts to like the backend. We use Redux Toolkit as global state management, and we use like a lot of small tools for like for messaging. We use Augmented, like getting Spotify songs inside the app. So we use like different libraries for that. Other integrations with Instagram, Instagram, but in its essence, the app is built in React Native. So yeah, other questions. So yeah, in general, like once you like, I think it's very important to like either like contribute to open source or like find a start. I had most of my learnings after I joined Hallparty, and it's like the best part of my career. an exponential curve. Like you can do much more when you're in a company or an open source organization, compared to when you're out on your own. So that is like one key takeaway I think I want to source budget or a startup you can like implement these. And when you're joining startups, be a bit selective. Like do not join. Like personally recommend just staying away. Try looking at the tech stack of the startup. Like try looking at the people working there. And if you find like good people working there and they are working with like cutting edge technology, like that's the place where you should be. And like it's a bonus if they are paying well as well. So yeah, like that's the deal. So I think I'll be wrapping up here if there are no more questions. But like it's an open house, like just feel free to unmute, ask any question if you have. And I think in the next few minutes, we'll I guess like be wrapping up.
I think that
And
is
like
everything
PPT
about
and
it.
stuff. But yeah,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. So I
Also,
think
shout out to the Discord server we have. Like I stay very active in that Discord server. So if you have any questions, feel free to hit me up either on PM on Discord or we have a React Native channel. If you have any issues you face, like I'll most likely be very active. So yeah, Raghav, you can go on.
I think sorry, Suprit, can you turn off your stream? Yeah, yeah. Because वो थोड़ा सा नेट तब गायब हो रहा था.
Cool.
So yeah, I think it was a great session. I enjoyed it thoroughly. And as Suprit said, Discord server is very active, and it would be great अगर तुम्हारे पास कोई questions वगैरह हो तो उस पर drop कर लो. Suprit is also active there. So do we have a separate React Native channel or app development channel only? You can actually just like ping on the app development
No, we
channel.
have a React Native channel.
Oh, that's great. So then just
Yeah.
tag Suprit for the React Native, and I think that would be great. I'll turn off my stream, the YouTube stream, so that if you want to interact, you can. So, all right, our YouTube stream has ended. So